Welcome back to the channel. As promised, I'm going to give a tour of the garden today. We're going to look at the various things that I do like, don't like. You'll get a lay of the land. You're going to be able to see where I'm coming from, and hopefully in a few years where we're at. So let's get on with the tour today and see what we've got going on. So in front of the house, there's a large green lawn. And essentially we're going to keep it the same. We're not going to change much. Well, we are going to change things, but along the driveway, there's going to be a row of low-cut boxwood hedges right down. I sort of like that formality, and that will lead you to the front walk entrance. So when you come up to the driveway, this is the entrance that leads to this is the walkway that leads to the house. Currently there's a crepe myrtle that is going to stay. I actually started trimming this up to sort of groom it into what I think it should be or like it to be. I really don't know anything about crepe myrtles, but I'm going to learn, and hopefully I don't kill this along the way. Approximately here, I'm going to do an archway, and we're going to have a wisteria growing up over it. I think I'm going to do a large cement or terracotta pot to grow it out of, and that's a whole nother project, and I'll get into that another time. But with those hedges leading up to this point, as it were, terminating with the archway, it'll sort of lead you to the front door. Now over here on this side of the front porch, there are some boxwood hedges. They're going to stay. I've already started to trim them, and I will continue to hopefully trim them and grow them and nurture them, and to make them into something larger, a little more decorative and beautiful. The bed that's in front of them needs to be raised up a little bit. There's a water drainage problem, which again, hopefully down the road you'll see a bit of. But we're going to raise that up a little bit with some soil and mulch, and various annuals and perennials will be planted in and around the boxwood hedges. Forgive me, these are some of the leftover or plants that I took with me from New York and brought here. Jumping over to the other side of the front porch, I've already started mulching, planting some daylilies that came with us to this property. Purchased a apple tree, which I'm going to grow out in a pot for the first year, I believe, and then hopefully within a year we've taken care of or decided where on the property we're going to plant the apple tree. And again, you'll see, if you follow along, subscribe, please hit the subscribe button, follow along, you'll see how all that comes along. Over here we also have some more boxwoods, and I have some daylilies waiting to be planted out. This again will be mulched and raised up and filled with annuals and perennials. Now, I did say I have a bit of a drainage problem, and if you watch my previous video, the ground it's very rich. I think it is rich. I believe it's rich. I'm not an expert, but it's also very, the soil has a lot of clay in it. Kind of feels that way. It does not break apart. It's not crumbly or loamy at all. So the water takes a while to recede. That being said, the gutters sort of just pour water out onto the yard, and the yard is saturated, and the low spots get filled with water. So what we're eventually going to do, and this is another project amongst the many millions of projects that need to get done, or that I'm going to do, is I'm actually going to make a rain garden. So what we'll do, really quick little trough leading to the next space that I'm going to show you, and let me now show you that. So right here we have a old dead pine tree. The tree needs to be cut down, and I believe the previous owners piled a ton of mulch on this spot. That mulch will be taken up and reused on the two front beds, as well as maybe others throughout the property, and the tree will be removed. But eventually what I'd like to do is have that little trough, that little low area that I'm going to dig out, funnel the water into this spot here, and make this into a rain garden. So the ground will be dug out a little bit, and various plantings will be put into place, flowers, bushes, etc., that prefer water or can handle the water, And yes, so the water will move away from the house into the rain garden. It will fill up, be like a mini pond for a couple of days, subside, beautiful flowers, plants, etc., etc. So again, another project for another day. Let's get on to the next area. I think I forgot to mention that all the way out down towards the street, we're going to do a 2-rail white picket fence, and my wife would like to do hanging baskets on that, filled with all sorts of beautiful peonies and whatnot. That's fine. In front of that, between the fence and the house, actually closer to the roadside, there will be 2 pear trees placed on either end of the property. And so when they reach their maturity, theoretically, there'll be these big, beautiful, mature trees. So now that is south, and that will cast a lot of shade, but that's okay because, again, this is going to be mostly lawn, and it's going to take 10 to 15 to 20 years for them to eventually get to that part where they shade so much. The sun rises east to west. It basically starts over here behind me, and then it works its way that way. So yeah, let's go to the west side. So we're on the west side of the house, and over here, as I'm pointing to it, is currently what I'm going to be calling my little nursery or test area. Let me back up a bit here. My nursery or test area. I currently have an English boxwood, and it's supposed to be slow growing. We'll see if it grows well in this area, in this environment, in the soil. I'll be taking cuttings and growing more plants from it. Behind it is a red twig dogwood. Never grew red twig dogwood. I've seen pictures of red twig dogwoods. They look very pretty. I'd like to grow one. I'm going to try to grow one. If it grows well there, I may, again, either move it or take cuttings of it and put it elsewhere or grow it elsewhere as well. But essentially on this side of the property, this is going to be sort of a test bed, test area for plants that need some sun as they're getting now, but later in the day, they get quite a bit of shade. Okay. So we're now leading back away from the west side. We're still on the west side, but we're leading towards the back of the house. As you can see, to the one side I have a deck, and then behind me, well, grass, more grass. Behind me here, we'll eventually do flowering shrubs, and then alongside the deck, perhaps more flowering shrubs. Have to be careful of the various heights, provide shade certain times of the day, blah, 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 blah. But this area right here will be mostly flowering shrubs, at least at this point. That may change down the line, but for now, maybe magnolias, camellias, that sort of thing. Okay, we're now currently behind the house and behind the garage. It's a weird little junction. So, and I already have a hydrangea in the ground, which I planted recently. I forget which one this is, but I do have an incredible coming that's actually going to go behind this. That's going to go underneath this window here, as it only gets approximately 4 to 5 feet tall. This hydrangea eludes me, but if I remember, I'll put it right here. And I think underneath that window, I'm going to do another hydrangea as well. You'll be able to see them from the deck, and everything will look lovely. The middle of the lawn here, or the area right before me, will probably remain lawn for quite some time. It is a small, awkward thing, and you'll see it develop over time. Okay, now we're getting behind the garage towards the back of the property, and as you can see, I already have my compost bin set up. I have some pots with comfrey in them. They need to be planted out, and there's a wood line behind me that will probably more than likely stay. I may make some adjustments. Some of the wood line has grown onto the property. I may cut back some of that, make some adjustments, tweak it. It's natural, going to leave it. So it's a nice little break from the rest of the world. So then behind the garage is very shady most of the day. And I'm toying with the idea of doing a shade garden back here. Although I'm also thinking about maybe making a potting station, as it were, a bench with maybe a cover, because late in the day it gets sunny, or I can work out here in the rain, not heavy downpouring rain, but drizzly rain, and do some potting or something along those lines. Plus I need some place to store all the pots that will be accumulating over time, but I have to be careful because of winds. The area does get quite windy, and I don't want my plastic pots blowing everywhere. So, but again, I'm thinking right now, shade garden. The ground here is very damp. It stays damp most of the time because it is in the shade, doesn't get that much sun. And again, the soil is very water retentive. So let's move on to the other side. Okay, so now the garage is behind the camera there, and we're moving further out onto the property. And behind me here, you can see this, well, that was one of many tree islands, I'll call them, where pine trees or shrubs, wild shrubs, something along those lines, vines, weeds, all started growing up. The prior homeowners just mowed around it and never took it down, tore it down. For whatever reasons, that's fine. So I started chopping this one down. It's very small, or small thin woods. I'm thinking where that island is, maybe where the future greenhouse goes. Not sure. That may move further this way. So let's turn the camera this way. And now, behind me you can see, looks like a couple more of the tree islands. Now these are the bigger tree islands, and they host at least one large pine tree each, with lots of small scrub oak and other small pine trees underneath them. They're going to go away because that's basically where the vegetable garden is going, and perhaps even the rose garden. Okay, so that small island of trees that I started cutting down that you just saw a second ago, that is now behind the camera, and in front of me is the driveway and lawn, lots of lawn. So the vegetable bed, the vegetable garden will extend this way. It's primarily going to consist of 5 to 10, actually I plan on growing out approximately 10 4x8 raised beds to grow a plethora of things, which we'll get into in the upcoming videos. And forward of that, I'm thinking of possibly a dahlia garden. It's a flower, go look it up. Dahlia garden on the other side of what I'm going to call the Grand Walk. And I'll get to that in a minute. But that front part gets the most amount of sun throughout the day, and dahlias just crave sun. They desire sun. The hotter, the more. They're South American plant. It's a wonderful thing. So where we're standing right here, right now, in what will be the future vegetable garden, does get afternoon shade from the garage and other plantings on the other side of the property. Towards the later part of the day, it'll get at least 8 hours of sunlight during the summertime, if not more. But during the later part of the day, let's say 4, 5, 6 o'clock, this will be in shade, which will be a welcome relief to many of the vegetables growing here, I'm sure. Surrounding the vegetable garden, I would like to do hedging. So some of it may be lower, some of it may be higher, but hedging, yes, because what I would like to do is create a very formal, clean, neat appearance, much as Monty Don has done in his garden. I've mentioned him a billion times before. He's an English gardener who has a lovely 2-acre garden that is it's formal, but as he's getting older and the garden is maturing, he's letting it get a little looser, but there's still a formality to it with various row hedges and etc., etc. So I'd like to do that as well, and that will also allow me to create rooms and windbreaks, because it is fairly windy here. So the hedging will help create windbreaks. It'll also help create rooms, as I just mentioned a second ago, as I'm repeating myself. And that again will help everything. Well, I'll get into further detail as to the various gardens at a later date, but let's just move on with the tour for now. Okay, so running behind one of the tree islands along the backside of the property here is basically the property line. It's woods on one side, grass on the other. It terminates at that tree island down there essentially, or somewhere within that tree island. That tree island for now is going to stay, and there is a major drainage issue here because within that wood line is the drainage ditch, which has been overgrown and overfilled over time. So I may create a new drainage ditch or work on a creative way to try to raise this ground here a little bit so that drainage becomes less of an issue and this part of the property can be more useful. So we came a little further back to this tree island over here, and over towards this side I have a neighbor who I've yet to meet, but there's a sort of awkward gap between the tree line and that tree island. So I'm thinking maybe a large flowering shrub of some sort, maybe a magnolia. That would be quite nice. And now let me swing the camera around and show you the rest. So that's the one tree island on the corner of the property. This is the other tree island on the other corner of the property, which is going to go away. I want it to go away. Actually, trust me, there's a tree island over here. This is another tree island that I also want to go away. So this one and the one that's over here will clear out hopefully soon. And again, there's a lot of lawn. Eventually, I'm thinking maybe this is where the rose garden will go. I'm not 100% sure at this point, but the vegetable garden ends somewhere over there. It's going to be approximately 60 feet wide. So I'd like to do another, perhaps flowering garden over here. So perhaps roses. I don't think the dahlias. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe a shade garden. Another shade garden. We'll see. So now we're looking back towards the house. And again, you can see lots of grass, lots of land. So lots of opportunities. I don't know if you can see that bit of raised grass right there. Let me show you. If my microphone isn't breaking up right now, this is the property line, approximate property line. So there's a lot of raised grass. This is the one island between me and my other neighbor. Okay, and now over here, there's a large gap between the two tree islands and an open spot between me and my neighbor. It's a little awkward. They can see onto my property, which is not a big deal because there's nothing here, but they also have no privacy in their backyard, as it were. So eventually I think a nice row of hedges of some sort, flowering bushes, something along those lines to give them privacy and give me a little bit of privacy. Flowering bushes might be nice. They might enjoy that. I don't know, we'll have to see. So now we're down at about the property line dividing my property to the lot next door. And it's just an empty lot next door at the moment. It may be built in the future. Knowing that, I may eventually wind up putting in some sort of hedging to again provide privacy from me and the neighbor next door. The large tree island here, this tree island, I'd like to probably remove because I think it's, well, it has a dead tree in it, and I believe it's probably a little habitat for small bitey things like snakes and or other voracious animals. So I don't know, we'll judge that in time. The tree island behind me here, this tree island here behind me, I may just clean up a bit, raise up some of the limbs, cut out some of the scrub, trim back the grass, and perhaps make into a type of, add more plantings around it, but in a way that I can control and make this into more of a shade garden, or the cornerstone of a shade garden. So again, we'll see. This is the street behind me with the various, some sort of scrub grass, native grass or something, invasive grass, growing up in the drainage ditch. I'll eventually be cutting that back, and I'm thinking along this side here, along the street side, doing some more hedging, again, to provide that layer of privacy. So we have another tree island, and then the drainage ditch filled currently with some sort of grass, which again, I'll be cleaning up the grass to try to clean up the drainage ditch so the drainage ditch performs its function better. There's also another island behind me. That island, I believe, I will keep for the time being because it is hiding a telephone pole, which is nice. So I don't see the telephone pole. Don't want to see the telephone pole. And again, perhaps I can do some sort of plantings around it once I clean it up and maybe raise the lower branches. And now we're underneath the pine tree, or the pine tree is between me. The street's behind you, or behind the camera. There's a pine tree towards the edge of the street and the corner of my driveway. And behind me, you can see a couple of the tree islands and the house, or the garage, I should say, at least, if not part of the house, but either way. So not sure 100% what I'm going to do with this area. Again, along the street side, perhaps some edging to provide some privacy. Along the driveway on the eastern side, maybe a flower garden. My wife is talking about perhaps doing some cut flowers, either for herself and or for sale. Perhaps this is what this area will be used for. that I have yet to determine. But again, you can see all the way to the back of the property there. It's quite a distance. I have lots of room to grow. Sky's the limit. I did mention before about a grand walkway. So let me just explain to you that real quick. Okay, so the front walkway is behind the camera now. So we are faced, so that is west, this is east approximately. And I'm thinking what I'd like to do eventually is grow hedging approximately anywhere, I haven't determined yet, but maybe 10 to 20 feet apart, going that way. Again, that tree island behind me will be gone, hopefully. Hedging all the way down towards the back of the property. I'm thinking more in the scope of 20 feet apart, and thus it would create a grand walkway. And on either side, you would have the vegetable garden, the rose garden towards the back. You would have a dahlia garden and a cut flower garden up here towards the front. But each of those spaces would be divided by hedging, thus creating rooms, each room accessible from the grand walkway. So if you were visiting, you could then walk down the grand walkway and look into each of the rooms or visit each of the rooms as you wished. So that's the land, that's the property. That's what I'm thinking now. Stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed, and let's see if we can't make this thing happen. If you don't follow me on Instagram, please follow me on Instagram. And again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I'm gonna just keep saying it until you subscribe, because I know there's a lot of people who watch this channel who don't subscribe. So please subscribe. And again, follow me on Instagram. I do daily photos or almost daily photos, and as things ramp up, then there'll be more photos. So that's it for today. I will catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.